On the four-wheeled side of the automotive world, it feels like the 70s was maybe the darkest time, probably the worst decade for automotive development. In short, things really only got worse with new emissions regulations forcing some manufacturers to get creative, yes, but for the most part, a lot of the great engines, especially here in America, the 1970s kind of killed a lot of these engines. But on the two-wheeled side of things, man, the 70s was almost the opposite. So much innovation was happening. I mean, for perspective, as the 60s came to a close, many of the most expensive, highest tech, highest performing motorcycles were rattly kickstart British bikes making like 50 horsepower. Then the CB750 came along, and all the Japanese manufacturers followed suit with big, high-revving inline fours. By the end of the 70s, motorcycles were so much more sophisticated than, they were at the beginning or end of the 60s. Many of them making upwards of 100 horsepower and so much tech, disc brakes, electric start, electronic ignition, adjustable suspension, and sophisticated frames. Motorcycles became better because the manufacturers, especially Japanese ones, focused so much on innovation, often risking basically their entire companies in hopes of figuring out what the future of motorcycling would be. One manufacturer that doesn't get talked about enough is Suzuki. While Honda and Kawasaki focused mostly on four-stroke development, Suzuki and Yamaha were over in the two-stroke realm, slowly taking over the racetrack. But it was becoming apparent that two-strokes may not be the future for flagship, large displacement, sort of sport touring bikes. Suzuki began asking a bold question. What if this dichotomy of two-stroke versus four-stroke is missing the point? What if there's another bit of engine technology that we're all ignoring? And what if we as a company are the first to jump on it? Now, our story really begins with this guy named Wankel, Felix Wankel. In short, Wankel patented a brilliant new kind of combustion engine all the way back in the 20s. Let me just give you my overly simplistic explanation. In a traditional combustion engine, a piston or pistons compresses air and fuel, and then a spark ignites that mixture, shooting the piston downwards. Then the momentum brings the piston back up, pushing the leftover exhaust out, and then the piston comes back down, pulling in more air and fuel, and the whole thing starts over. Now, an engine is able to turn this whole energy system into rotational power via a connection to a crankshaft. The up and down becomes spinning, if that makes sense. Now, it's a bit simpler and it's a bit different on a two-stroke combustion engine, but it's not that different, not like this. Wankel's design was radical. In short, instead of pistons moving up and down, it uses a single triangular-shaped rotor that spins inside an oval chamber. As the rotor turns, it creates spaces that change size, allowing air and fuel to mix, ignite, and produce power in a smooth, continuous motion. It's brilliant in its simplicity because you're not really turning up and down into spinning, you're just spinning. But what's really the point? Why reinvent the internal combustion engine? Isn't it good enough already? Aren't we just beginning to be able to tap into its potential? Well, for motorcycle application, it was really tempting to Suzuki and a few other manufacturers because it allows the engine to be smaller and simpler. In cars, extra displacement is really the simplest way to create more power, but in motorcycles, it was becoming apparent as the 70s carried on that with motorcycles like the CBX being the ultimate example of more displacement, you're going to hit a wall at a certain point in terms of size. What if 60, 80, 100 horsepower could be had from an engine half the size, and the Wankel engine could rev to incredible RPMs, and RPMs are also the key to more horsepower. That was what the Wankel rotary engine promised, a small but powerful power plant, and it wouldn't be smoky and loud like Suzuki's two strokes. So Suzuki was ready to jump on it. But they'd been beaten to the punch. See, originally, Wankel made this design for a compressor and then a supercharger for NSU's motorcycle engines. But in '54, NSU began working with Wankel on a full-blown rotary internal combustion engine based upon Wankel's supercharger design that was made specifically for motorcycle engines. This became known as the DKM engine, and for NSU, the real moneymaker wouldn't be necessarily in making their own rotary motorcycles, which were produced in very limited numbers, but rather in selling this potentially game-changing patent to loads of other companies, including Rolls-Royce and Alfa Romeo and Ford, and of course, companies like Mazda and Suzuki. Suzuki first got their hands on this rotary design in 1970. Now, mind you, this was a time in which Suzuki had dominated in one single area of motorcycle development. two-strokes. But motorcycles like the CB750 had just come out, and Honda was continuing to bring their four-stroke tech down to every class for production. These four-strokes, they were quiet, they did well in terms of emissions, but making more power for companies like Honda meant more displacement and more cylinders. The rotary technology promised to potentially fix all of this for Suzuki as they looked to get ahead as a company. The very future of motorcycle technology was unknown at this point, in the same way that some would say it is now, although guess what, it's still just the internal combustion engine. In just 3 years, Suzuki was able to take the Wankel design and turn it into a promising power plant. They opted for a 497cc displacement engine, and this motorcycle would be known as the RE5. I would assume this means Rotary Engine 500, but we're not exactly sure. Now that might sound small, but in a traditional cylinder displacement, this would be close to 1,000 cc's. Wankel engines produce incredible heat, so it was liquid and oil cooled. Still, the wear and tear is difficult to overcome. Suzuki developed special surface treatments for the inside of the combustion chamber, and what Suzuki found in their development was that though the power output was competitive with other large displacement engines at the time, the real value in this setup was the incredible smoothness of the rotary engine. And so Suzuki decided that making the bike a sort of big sport tourer, right in line with the CB750 and later the Goldwing, would be a better route than, say, an out-and-out screaming performer like Kawasaki's big two-strokes at the time. There's quite a bit of cool tech involved in making this motorcycle work, and we should give Suzuki its props for going all in on the rotary-powered motorcycle concept in a way that really nobody else did. From the innovative two-stage carburetor to the port design to even the exhaust. Suzuki invested millions into this project, even building a specific production facility for the RE5. But here's the thing, when you set out to build a truly revolutionary motorcycle, unlike anything that has ever existed, you kind of have to nail the styling. That's definitely a trend through motorcycle history. Suzuki decided to go mostly traditional with the styling. I mean, the RE5 looks basically like every other Japanese bike from the mid-70s, except when it came to the instrument cluster. Motorcycle gauges are typically round, but the whole thing wasn't round enough, and Suzuki wanted the styling to highlight the tech, that is the round rotary setup, so they made this gauge cluster round and cylindrical. So from the side, there's circles everywhere. The engine, the covers, the disc wheels, the rear tail section matching the front instrument section. And, I get what they were going for, but some of it felt forced, not exactly natural and timeless the way that, say, the CB750 was with its styling when it came out. The gauge cluster feels like it's just kind of plopped on top of the headlight awkwardly, and the tail section feels that way too. It's a strange design overall, like it was meant to stay thoroughly in the lane of traditional styling for the time, while also trying to be futuristic in little ways. I mean, compare this overall design with, a contemporary motorcycle like the MV Agusta 754. That's what a coherent design should look like. Everything flows, nothing is forced. When you look at a certain part of the bike, it stands out and you're like, wow, look at that exhaust. But it doesn't take away from anything else. It all kind of fits. This design with the RE5 was a bit awkward, but still there was the tech, right? I mean, it worked. This was revolutionary. Well, it wouldn't go quite Suzuki's way. It all started before the bike was even unveiled in '72 in the form of the oil crisis. Fuel prices were in the process of completely skyrocketing, and public concern over fuel efficiency was growing. Rotary engines, like the one in the RE5, are inherently less fuel efficient than traditional piston engines, and this made the RE5 just less appealing to consumers, especially when compared to other motorcycles and just more economical bikes. Coupled with this, motorcycle buyers in the 70s were becoming increasingly conscious of operating costs. While the RE5 boasted innovative engineering and smooth performance, its higher fuel consumption contrasted sharply with more frugal options from Honda and Yamaha and Kawasaki, particularly their four-stroke models, which is kind of tried and true tech at this point. On top of this, the oil crisis raised production and transportation costs for all manufacturers. For Suzuki, the complex rotary engine, it just added multiple layers of expense to the project. Developing and manufacturing the RE5's Wankel rotary engine was already going to be a costly endeavor. The rising costs of materials and energy, it just made the situation worse. And so they struggled to price it competitively. Now you would think at this point that Suzuki was alone in pursuing rotary tech, but you'd be wrong. At this very same time, actually, pretty much all the other major Japanese manufacturers were working to build their own rotary-powered motorcycles. Yamaha in particular would unveil this motorcycle, the RZ201, late in '72 at the Tokyo Motor Show. And this bike would never go into production, but it had one thing going for it. It looked better than the RE5 in just about every way. Consumers felt that maybe they weren't getting the absolute best version of a rotary-powered motorcycle in the RE5. Also, Yamaha managed to make their rotary engine look kind of decent. The RE5's engine was just messy and ugly. This was actually a big part of why Yamaha didn't move forward with the bike. To quote Ed Burke, rotary engines were ugly. In cars, no one cared because you can't see the engine, but a motorcycle engine is part of the aesthetic, and it's very difficult to make a rotary engine not look like a pump or compressor engine. And he's right, the RE5's engine looked exactly like that, a mess really. Still, Suzuki moved forward with the production of this motorcycle. Rumors of other motorcycles also being rotary powered actually pushed Suzuki forward. The bike rolled out in 1974 with millions spent not only on R&D, but also production and advertising, a revolutionary touring machine, unmatched smoothness of acceleration. The MSRP for the RE5 was $24.95, which was expensive but not insane, and as a whole, the RE5's initial reception was, well, meh to say the least. Motorcyclists Magazine has an amazing article on the history of the RE5 and its development, and here's what they say about the launch of the motorcycle. Generally speaking, customers and magazine editors greeted the RE5 lukewarmly. There were fans in both camps, and road tests pointed out the bike's strength, engine smoothness, reasonable handling and comfort, and decent horsepower from a 500cc engine. But detractors soon outweighed the fans, complaining of excess engine heat, excessive throttle play, oil and fork seal leaks, an average seat, a tiller-esque bar with too much pullback unless the bike had a fairing, and funky styling. And so despite the lush rollout, the explanations of features and benefits, the advertisements, and the colorful brochures handed out at dealerships and bike shows, the RE5, despite all its new technology and uniqueness, simply never generated much excitement or retail sales over its 2-year production span. Dealers had new bikes on the floor well into the late 70s. So a big part of the problem with the RE5 wasn't just related to the rotary tech and the fact that it was a lot of new tech. There was just stuff that Suzuki should have had figured out with the bike, like, suspension and seat comfort, things like that. To make matters significantly worse, another little-known company was poised to attack the American big touring segment just as aggressively, that is Honda and the iconic GL 1000 Goldwing. Yeah, it cost a bit more than the RE5, but it came out at the exact same time and it delivered on everything that the RE5 promised to be and more. You name it, performance, reliability, usability, serviceability. The GL 1000 was the bike Suzuki wanted to make, but with this new technology, they just weren't ready, and as we'd see with cars, rotary technology would never quite find its path towards really ousting the traditional combustion engine. As production continued in 1976, the RE5 faced mounting problems. The rotary engine was difficult and costly to maintain, and it suffered from technical issues like oil leaks and overheating. By the end of '76, Suzuki recognized that the RE5 wasn't resonating with the market. Despite the innovative nature of its rotary engine, in their mind, the RE5 was simply too ahead of its time in a market that valued reliability, ease of maintenance, and traditional engine designs. And so sales were disappointing, and Suzuki made the decision to discontinue the model after just 2 years of production. After the RE5, Suzuki would focus, obviously, on more conventional engine designs. It would actually take another 10 years before Suzuki would really invest super heavily into a project, but this time it would work out and it would be in the form of the GSX-R 750. Now, perhaps the more interesting question is this. What if we take away some of Suzuki's weird design choices and maybe the poor timing of the RE5's release and just look at the potential for rotary-powered motorcycles? Why didn't they work, and could they work today? And are the benefits of them being smaller and smooth, could we see rotary-powered motorcycles again? One of the primary issues that hindered the success of early rotary engines was the sealing problem, particularly with the apex seals that maintain compression in the rotary chamber. These seals were prone to wear, leading to oil leaks, loss of power, and premature engine failure. But in modern times, advancements in terms of material science have led to the development of more durable and efficient sealing materials, ceramic composites and advanced lubricants. There's potential that the sealing issues could be addressed and that, rotary engines could be reliable and have longevity. Manufacturing techniques have also advanced a lot since the 70s. Historically, rotary engines have been criticized for their poor fuel efficiency and higher emissions. The combustion process in a rotary engine doesn't allow for perfect sealing, which can lead to incomplete combustion and thus higher emissions. However, modern emissions regulations have become so much stricter, and manufacturers have developed better fuel management systems and catalytic converters to reduce emissions in conventional engines. So it is logical to think that similar advancements could be applied to rotary engines, making them more environmentally friendly. Also, the rise of electric motorcycles and hybrid powertrains presents an alternative to the challenge of internal combustion engines, including rotary engines. Manufacturers could explore hybrid systems that combine the benefits of a rotary engine's smoothness and high power output with the efficiency of electric motors. And this would kind of be the best of both worlds. One of the advantages still of rotary engines is its compact size. Without the need for traditional pistons, cylinders, and valve mechanisms, rotary engines can be more space efficient. So they still are ideal for pretty much every segment of motorcycles if we just could figure out some of these other problems. Modern lightweight materials like carbon fiber and advanced alloys, these could maybe enhance the benefits of rotary engines and maybe even making them suitable for high performance machines. In today's motorcycle market, there's a growing demand for unique, innovative bikes that stand out from the crowd. People are looking for motorcycles that offer something different, whether it's in terms of performance or tech or design. So this trend could make rotary engine motorcycles appealing again, as they are kind of a fascinating departure from the traditional internal combustion engines. And there's always weirdos out there who just want motorcycles that are different. Part of the problem too is just the public perception that is tied to these early failures. Suzuki's RE5, despite its unique engine, failed to capture the public's imagination, but it is the motorcycle that people think of when they think of rotary motorcycles. But all of it is tied up in a lot of the other problems with the RE5. So to succeed in a modern market, a new rotary engine motorcycle would need to kind of overcome this perception hurdle. In a world where innovation is everything though, I really do think that rotary engine motorcycles could find a niche with the right combination of engineering, marketing, and consumer interest. I really do think that rotary engine bikes could make a successful comeback because they offer a unique alternative to traditional piston-powered bikes and electric motorcycles. But the problem is any focus on rotary technology has just been put to the wayside in the past decade or so for, R&D into electric platforms, despite there being so little interest in electric motorcycles at this point. Now, I would love to hear from you. Do you think that rotary-powered motorcycles could make a comeback? And have you had any experience with rotary engines, whether in cars or motorcycles? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one. Ride safe.